Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be, from your background, are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. We are streaming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod, as we always do, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time. If you haven't, and Eric Jason in the chat has reminded you, make sure that you smash the thumbs up and follow our channel. Subscribe if you want to do that. Definitely subscribe to the audio format of the podcast, which drops right after we get done on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart. It's a new week. Today we're talking about the resistance, the hashtag resistance. We're going to just re-rack this entire experience that we all saw in 2017, where there were so many people in the United States government who were resisting the incoming administration. Lots of examples to get to today. Going to drill down a little bit on leaks coming from our ex-girlfriend over at the FBI pertaining to the deportations, and how we can maybe tie that to a possible resolution for the way we can reform the FBI. I have a couple of thoughts on that I want to throw at Garrett. And then also some activist judges who think that they, from their small bench in a small location, an obscure time of day, can just stop the duly elected president from doing things that I think are constitutional. And then incoming the consultants. They're going to be studying how the federal workforce is completely failing across the board and saying, you better justify your existence, and maybe wrapping it up with a crazed woman in government who represents the worst people in the world, that are liberal white women who will cut off their children's genitals to impress their friends at brunch. This one, though, might not have children to cut the genitals off of. What are we talking about? You'll have to wait. We have lots to get to before then. We are excited to start it. So bring on Garrett O'Boyle, my co-host today at GOB Actual. Hopefully his back is a little bit more functional than it was on Saturday, because we got to do some big lifting today, man. I'm going to need you some deadlifts straight off the floor.
I may throw my back out again, Steve, because I've done it. I have broken through glass ceilings like Kamala Harris, and I am no longer shadow banned, I don't think, on Twitter.
You finally hit the threshold, man. You finally got enough people looking at you on social media that you can make a shekel or two from Elon Musk. Now you get the experience that I get, where I see small-time troll accounts making, I don't know, thousands of dollars, and I'm like, hey, I went up from 40 to 45 this pay period. But it pays for itself, and we're not in it for the money. We're in it for the sharing of information, which we endeavor to do on social media and on the American Radicals Podcast. I want to start with a blast from the past. I have a quick video talking about the resistance. And this one was from back in the day, 2017. I mean, I guess at this point it's getting close to a decade. Can we say back in the day? I was joking offline with Tracy Beans this morning, and I told her that she was saying that the 1980s are almost a half century away. In 5 years, 1980 will be 50 years ago. And I said, well, did you know that the time that lapsed between the moon landing and the movie Titanic are the exact same as the movie Titanic and right now? You thought you felt old, and now you really do. But blast from the past. This is Al Sharpton on MSNBC, where he once had a nightly show talking to us about the resistance and doing so very artfully and articulately as he is wont to do.
Tonight is the measure of whether the country begins in the state of Wisconsin a national drive to push back, or whether we have more to go to build a movement of resistance. But resist we must, and we will much about that be committed.
Well said, Reverend. I mean, I think we're done here. I mean, can we just hang it up for the day on the American Radicals?
That is one of my all-time favorite clips. I used to listen to this show called Armstrong and Getty. They're out in California. They're like a morning news talk. They're pretty good. I should tune back in and see how they're doing these days. But they used to play that clip all the time, and it doesn't ever get old. We must to do about that be committed. Okay.
He is still around, man, marching people through Costco on a boycott where they didn't buy anything. So his skills have not left him in his older age, as he's lost weight. He's one of these guys that looked better when he was fat. Let's talk about a guy, though, that probably could stand to lose a couple of pounds, particularly in light of the fact that he's got quite a big lift in front of him. That's mass deportations. That's Tom Homan. And he did not realize the lift that it was going to be, because the resistance from the interior, the calls coming from inside of the House, it was revealed to us over the weekend. And you and I have been talking about this with our moles on the inside about the resistance within the FBI wanting to thwart the federal government's efforts to engage in these mass deportations. But there was a leak that went out about an upcoming operation in Los Angeles, and that ops plan was made public to the media. So, I mean, seems like maybe a risk to the officers who were involved there, maybe a risk to the people who lived in that area. Not really thinking about that, though, but it seems to me that the DOJ has indicated that the FBI was the source of the leak. So here's Tom Homan commenting on that. And then I want to get to a possible resolution for this resistance we're seeing.
Indications are this is coming from our own FBI. How certain are you of that?
Information leading to that. Again, I'll let the Department of Justice do their own investigation. But again, I talked to the Deputy Attorney General this week, and they've opened up a criminal investigation. He thinks the information is coming from there also, so we'll let that investigation play out. But some of the leads point that way.
And that's Tom Homan saying that an FBI agent or employee of some kind leaked this operational plan. So I had a text message from a member of the media, a couple of them this morning, saying, how can you actually salvage the Federal Bureau of Investigation right now? Your thoughts, and then I'll give you mine.
I don't know that you can. I mean, especially of late, I've been talking with people who are still willing enough to talk to somebody like me, as you know, and as you have faced. That's few and far between, or has been for most of this time. But I think with the new administration, with Kash Patel most likely becoming the next director, I think there's a lot of people who are more aligned with us, who are like, okay, maybe we can salvage it. And I'm sure when they aren't in a situation like ours, there's probably the rose-colored glasses are the lenses are a little thicker, where they think, oh, I am doing good work, and the FBI is good or can be good again. But when you see stuff like this, and when you see things like what we all whistleblew about, I don't know if it is salvageable. And then add to that the history of, I mean, seriously, going back to 1908, and then through the entire history of what would eventually become the FBI, there is just black eye after black eye after black eye of things they've done, things that were wrong, things that were illegal, things that were immoral. And then you have this where it's subterfuge from within the government. And on one hand, I say, hey, well, at least you're standing by your convictions. But on the other, and where I think it's different than something like people like you and I have done, is what's your reasonable belief that the FBI is doing something wrong here by assisting ICE and DHS to enforce federal criminal law? That used to be the FBI's bread and butter. But now, when they're called to help enforce federal criminal law with other agencies, it's getting leaked. What you want Tren de Agua in your communities? That is the polar opposite of what somebody in the FBI should be standing for and what somebody in the FBI should be doing. But now they're leaking it. So these are criminals compounded. They were criminals when they came here because they broke our laws coming here. Now they're part of a gang, a notorious gang, and they're continuing to engage in other criminal activity. All things that the FBI should be wanting to stop. And then you have at least one employee who says, I'm going to do my best to subvert that. I don't know how you salvage it.
I want to hone in on the comment you just made about, do you want Tren de Aragua to be part of your community? I think it goes back to the fact that we saw states like Texas and Florida send illegals to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, and they were gone within a day, because we want everybody here, just not that close to us. Make sure you're staying down in Laredo, where the dirty people are, not near us at all. So here's what I want to proffer, and I'm going to go back to something that I've been suggesting for a couple of years now that might be a potential resolution, and I'm going to marry it to a thing that we just saw in my home state of Florida. Now, for the last couple of years, I said that a potential resolution, this is before a Kash Patel directorship was on the horizon. This is back in the day, we thought it was very likely that you would get Joe Biden part due. They would try to make it just small enough of a election to rig it, or you'd get a Kamala Harris or something to that effect. Well, we could take the teeth out of the attack dog. We could take away the guns from the FBI, make them unarmed investigators. You talked about the early days of the FBI when it was a Bureau of Investigation, not an FBI. They didn't have guns. They could do investigations, and then they would be forced to partner with local sheriff's offices, police departments, and we could federally deputize some of their people, as the FBI does now, as the DEA does, as the ATF does, because they don't have enough personnel. They bring in the local guys who are experienced detectives, have that local knowledge, know the usual suspects. They know how to actually carry forward an investigation, and they just need some federal resources to bring those cases above the county level, the state level, maybe to a federal level. Why wouldn't we just enhance that? That could be a potential way to do it. So let's marry this to what we're seeing in Florida right now, and then get back to the idea of, we're going to send all of the illegals to places like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, because Governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis, just announced that state authorities are going to be assisting with the ICE deportation. So here's a lowdown on it.
Yeah, essentially, state troopers will be trained under DHS and ICE specifically for illegal immigration enforcement, broadening the state's role in these deportations. Now, the governor announcing this agreement at a press conference at the Capitol today. Under it, FHP troopers will be able to interrogate and detain people suspected of being in the country illegally. They can also execute warrants and make arrests at ports of entry or coastlines in the state. If an individual is found to be in the country illegally, they can then bring them to ICE detention facilities.
The goal is we need to reestablish interior enforcement in this country. We have to fulfill the president's mission to effectuate the largest deportation program in American history.
And this is part of the 287G program, which the governor, in his battle for new state immigration enforcement laws, wants local police and sheriff's offices to all participate in as well. Now, these broadened duties won't take effect right away. The governor, when asked about it today, says troopers will undergo extensive training before they're deputized.
Okay, Garrett. So here's where I want to put this. What if we took away all the guns and we did what Florida's doing with immigration for 18 code and 21 code? That would be criminal violations, drug violations, maybe even national security. There's other codes for immigration laws. And we gave limited deputization to local authorities to affect that. And then we had states like California, Colorado, Illinois. Those are the three states right now where we've seen the leaks that have come out about these ICE deportations, who would naturally say, well, we're sanctuary states. We love Tren de Aragua. We want them to be part of our communities. So we already have Pam Bondi at the Attorney General, head of the DOJ, saying, well, we're going to cut off your funding. No more block grants. It leaves more money that we could send to good places like Florida, who are cooperating with us. And you guys are free to not offer your officers to assist with us, and we will just abandon those states entirely. You voted for it. You get all the illegals now. So Martha's Vineyard could be full time, not just 24 hours until they can use all their resources to get them on a bus and get them those dirty brown people out of our communities here. They're really not going to have that option there. Could that be a potential resolution?
I think it's a great piece of the puzzle because one, what you're seeing in Florida is fantastic. Cooperation from state and local and county level law enforcement. Because as we've talked about before, who's doing the real police work? We know it's not the FBI, as you hammer every day with their press releases over on X. We know it's not them. And so it's far more likely, especially when they're doing targeted enforcement, like Governor DeSantis was talking about, far more likely that local and state are going to run into people who are illegal or suspected of being illegal, like they mentioned in that clip, and then go from there, especially if they have this additional deputization and training on on what to do and how to get them deported or keep them in custody and where to transfer them. And in the meantime, yeah, you blue states, especially you ones who are engaging in resistance 2.0, you're on your own. You're not getting federal funding, you're not getting federal help, you're not getting federal grants, and your people are going to suffer. And in a way, I'm kind of like, well, go ahead and suffer because this is what you voted for. And when I think of a place like Chicago or Illinois writ large, I do think, how did you go so far off the rails? I've spent plenty of time in Illinois, especially a little over a decade ago when I would travel to and from Kentucky and Wisconsin, many stops in Illinois, and most of it is like Iowa or Nebraska or Wisconsin, where it's not just Chicago esque, but Chicago is what runs the state. And so I say send them all there. Send them to Denver, send them to Chicago, send them to your big cities. And those, by and large, those cities are already strapped. They're already overburdened with problems and illegals and gangs and violence. And it's a direct result of their policies and their resistance. So I say bring it on.
I will quibble with one thing from you, Garrett, and that is that the FBI doesn't do real police work. I mean, how else would you explain a
Oh,
photo like this, which is an FBI agent, a girl boss, pointing her pistol into a baby crib on a January 6th warrant because she was in tactical mode, right? She had to use
mhm,
her pistol flashlight as opposed to turning on the light in the house. I
right.
mean, just seems like common sense,
Common
but
sense.
we're
It's
not we're not cameraing that too bad today. It just made me think of it. But we're talking about resistance, okay? So away from FBI and the efforts there to thwart the ICE operations, there are resistances in the judiciary as well, as now some of these activist judges have come forward and right away they're saying, well, we're going to stop the president from doing it. I'm really waiting on the Andrew Jackson, that's a great ruling, now let him enforce it comment. I think we'll probably get something to that, which is way more capitalization on True Social and exclamation points. Maybe we'll get it. So reporting from Fox News on immigration. Federal court blocks the Trump administration from sending detained Venezuelan immigrants. Thank you, Fox News. You mean illegal aliens to Guantanamo Bay, which is what the plan is. Actually, some of the worst actors are going to go down to Gitmo. So lawyers for these three illegals said in a legal filing that the detainees, quote, fit the profile of those the administration has prioritized for detention in Guantanamo. You mean illegal aliens? Venezuelan men detained in the El Paso area with charges of connections with Tren de Aragua. So that would seem to be fitting. But this Judge Kenneth Gonzalez, granted a temporary restraining order. The filing came as part of a lawsuit on behalf of these three men filed by the Center for Constitutional Rights and the ACLU,
mm,
Mexico, and Las Americas Immigrant Advisory Center. Man, I miss the 1990s ACLU.
yeah.
It says American civil liberties, right? Not Venezuelan gangbanger civil liberties, right?
Well, allegedly, but they've drank all the Kool-Aid since the 90s, and they're part of the resistance. They've got TDS as bad as anybody. But I think of this judge, and we talked about the judge in Boston the other day who is also part of the resistance. And when you think of the separation of powers, sure, there are times where a judge will rule against a president or laws will get overturned or changed, or case law will help shift things to be more properly aligned with what we thought was American idealism. But in this case, you straight up just have rogue judges who say, well, I've got the power to stop this, even though the vast majority of Americans want this type of action to be taken. I'm going to stand in the way because I can, because I have a, a different view on the world. So they're not looking at it as a judge should, where they read the law, they read the proposed rules, or the executive order or whatever, and then they look at it through a lens of legal statute and case law, and then come to a decision. Instead, they're just standing in the way because resist we much against Donald Trump.
I'm curious about how much USAID money went to the American Civil Liberties Union. That might be something that the Doge could dig into. Maybe
Yeah.
that could explain their significant pivot away from constitutional liberties to just being reliable mouthpieces for the communists in this country. And talk about another reliable mouthpiece for the country. That would be the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness.
Sure
Talking
does.
about further resistance here. The Justice Department seeking to stop an order keeping the Doge out of the Treasury system. Not like they indicate from the title that they just want to like go Scrooge McDuck into the Treasury and just start taking stuff. That's not actually what it pertains to. So here's another activist judge, U.S. District Judge from the Southern District of New York. Oh, seems like another reliable state that we should probably abandon. His name is Paul Engelmeyer. He's an appointee from former President Barack Obama. There you go. He issued a temporary restraining order Saturday that sided with 19 Democrat state attorneys general who claimed that giving Doge full access to the Treasury Department's payment systems violates the law. The lawsuit was spearheaded by Letitia James. They all seem to play really well together, unlike the other side. So the Treasury Secretary, his name is Besant, he sent a letter to Congress early last week saying that Doge was given read-only access. So the guy who's in charge of the Treasury Department said, I'm giving Doge access. Seems like it's his call. Read-only access. They can't edit, right? You've gotten those Word documents that you can't actually add on anything to. So he sent Treasury data, and that this investigation is, quote, not cause payments for obligations such as Social Security, Medicare to be delayed or rerouted. So any sort of wringing of hands that people wouldn't get their entitlement welfare payments or just that's just unfounded concerns. The judge it's a sweeping order. It's overly broad. So it bars anybody who's a political appointee from accessing the Treasury systems, which would include the Secretary of the Department of Treasury. So maybe these legal eagles who constantly do things like submit lawsuits where they say the Federal Bureau of Investigations, or in this case, this judge from New York should reconsider the way that they shape their language so they couldn't stop the actual appointed and Senate approved Secretary of the Treasury from, I don't know, logging in to see his email.
I want to know where this was in years past, and I think it's a point to the cold Civil War that we talk about, because it's 2025. You're telling me that in the last 200 years there's not been a time in American history where, for whatever reason, obviously it wasn't Doge back then, but for some reason there wasn't a judge who reasonably thought and could show through other case law or other examples to make a reasonable argument to do something like this. That's never happened before. But now suddenly Donald Trump is back in office and he's bringing in private entities to help clean out government, and they're doing it at the president's beck and call, which is at the people's beck and call, because this is what we voted for. And a judge, again, just stands in the way and says, no, you can't do that. And it's especially rich because now even the head of the department is barred from accessing the systems that he is literally, Steve, I know you love that word, literally in charge of.
That would be an interesting way to go about it. Just get some activist judges to issue restraining orders on everybody as they get appointed in there. I mean, this is the grip it and rip it strategy that we need to have. You were talking about how, and we'll get to all of these employees that are low performers and can they actually be fired? I just say be creative. I mean, let them enforce it. Let's just turn off their keys to get in the building. And then, they were late. They're fired for cause now, right? I mean, I think that's just going to be what it has to get to, this point of mutually assured destruction. There was a point of, we'll go back to the FBI and the DOJ. They were at odds with each other, more resistance, particularly over the January 6th investigations. They were going to turn over this list of employees who were investigating it so that they could be vetted to find out what their actual involvement in it was. And as you and I have been pointing out, that's not a comprehensive list, Garrett. Can you explain where there might be actual gaps that we tried to send over to the Department of Justice via our connections, that maybe they need to expand the list?
Yeah, for sure. So part of me is hopeful that this is just kind of step one into rooting out the worst of the worst actors re January 6th. And then there's going to be a whole swath of other issues that are more unique or individualized in nature that they're going to have to get to. But I think what the administration doesn't understand, and quite frankly, I lean towards thinking that even the Justice Department under Biden or Trump the first time or Obama or whoever probably doesn't understand didn't understand some of these nuances either. But from an FBI perspective, when you open a case and take January 6th, this was 2021. Many of those cases are now being ordered to be shut down. But say you open the case in 2021. The way it works in the FBI is that case stays open, especially because it's considered terrorism. So the policies are a little different, but there's different settings, I guess is the word I'll use for lack of a better term, where once a case is done, quote unquote done, there are different categories that you can set it in. But for some reason, via policy in the FBI, you have to leave it as an open case. And I'm forgetting some of the terminology that is used in their system, but what happens along the line, because people are trying to promote, or they get this case and then a year later they transfer to a different field office, or they don't want to work terrorism, so they're working hard to get it onto the white collar squad or whatever. These cases end up going through different case managers, sometimes multiple, more than one, or more than two even, because they might get transferred again throughout the years. So the FBI or the DOJ is missing a lot of crucial information regarding who initially opened these cases, and therefore potentially who enacted some of the worst weaponization in a lot of these cases. And you've mentioned too TFOs. They're completely missing all TFOs who are involved, because this went to FBI employees only. So TFOs aren't FBI employees, even though they oftentimes work in FBI space. For those who don't know, TFO is a task force officer. So it's a state or different federal agency or city police department or county sheriff who are working. They're deputized fully. They have the full investigative authority as an FBI agent, and oftentimes they're opening the cases. But the DOJ is thus far entirely missing all of that data.
Yeah. I mean, even my own experience, maybe explain it. When I transferred from Iowa to Florida, I came into work child pornography cases. All the agents in my office had existing child porn cases. I said, transfer them to me. I will become the case manager of those cases. So you don't have to worry about them anymore. I didn't open those cases. I sort of just assumed the responsibilities at that point. So if you're going to look back on, well, and in that office in Daytona Beach, who was doing the work on those child pornography cases, it would not be just me. It would be those other agents that were involved. So that's sort of a way to be more expansive on the list. But for what we are having right now, this list, the fight over it, sending it, which is ridiculous, that the FBI, which operates underneath the Department of Justice, was saying we're not going to cooperate with our umbrella organization. They're not going to allow any sort of accounting or review of the work we're doing, which is patently ridiculous, because you actually do have file reviews every 90 days. You're supposed to be under review. But they've finally came to some sort of an agreement. Reports that the FBI and DOJ strike an agreement. Just a ridiculous way to start a sentence. So here's the lawsuit. on the January 6th agent list, there were fears of retaliation from these agents. Why would they have anything to fear? I don't know.
Exactly.
So according to the text of the deal, the Trump administration cannot release information about the FBI agents who investigated the J6 cases without giving the agents at least 2 days notice so that the matter can be considered again in federal court. I guess if somebody had engaged in some sort of egregious activity, they could release their name to the public. I don't know what the fear is of that. Lawyers for the agents argue that any effort to review or discriminate against agents involved in the J6 cases would be unlawful and retaliatory in violation of civil service protections. They also cited, quote, profound concern that the list of thousands of FBI agents involved would be leaked to the public and it would threaten their safety. What sorts of measures could you take to mitigate threats to your safety, Garrett?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe utilize the training that you have.
Mm.
You carry a firearm.
Mm. Mm.
If you take your job seriously, as you already should have, you have different mechanisms in place. Even on your way home, you take a different route. You go a little slower.
But look, they can't afford that gas. Oh, wait. The government pays for their gas and their
And
vehicle.
their car, yeah. And I don't know, maybe get a ring cam. We had one of those when I was in Kansas, because there are sometimes concerns of depending on what you're working on, or maybe you get crosswise with a source and they know your name. And but this is the main piece. Is This is what happens in a free society. You and I don't care if you're just a cop. Steve, did you ever, on a traffic stop or a call for service, did you ever refuse to tell somebody your name? It's wholly absurd.
I used to get complained on because people thought I was pranking them. I would say, I'm Officer
Officer
Friend.
Friend.
Officer Friend 10962. Hey, Officer O'Boyle, what's your badge number?
532.
Oh, it's almost like you've done that before.
Yeah. And I've seen it before where officers may be a little resistant, and I think it's kind of dickish. You got somebody out with a camera. I never once, and then the people who recording you, they don't know how to respond because it's just natural. Or, I'm recording you, right? And I say, yeah, I'm recording you too. See that red light coming from my
I'm recording
squad car?
you recording me, man.
Like,
This is just a circle with no end to it.
I never ever had any issue with somebody recording me or threatening to post a video or anything of that nature, because I'm doing my job and I'm doing it right, or at least most of the time I'm doing it right. I'm sure there are times where I didn't do it exactly right, or maybe I said something that offended someone or whatever. I mean, part of that is just law enforcement. You're getting stopped by the cops, you're already offended. So it happens. But then with the FBI, you are not a secret agent, even as an FBI agent. And I think of this, it was one of the last things I was working on in Kansas. This guy was a drug addict. It was just a guardian. So for those who don't know, that's basically like a tip. And then you do a little bit of preliminary work to determine if it should be opened into a full investigation. So you don't have all of the FBI tool belt at your, or at least you're not supposed to, but by policy, you're limited in what you can do. But one of the things you can do is go and find the person and go and talk to them, which typically is the best thing to do in law enforcement, is go talk to people. Uh, I, I don't think they have any relatively new seasons, but I used to be into the show Bosch on Amazon Prime, and he had this little, just white normal piece of computer paper printed off at his desk, and it said something like "Get off your ass and go knock on doors." And that is such a simple rule and premise for law enforcement, and it's the opposite of what happens in the FBI. Most people are just sheltered inside the office and trying to do everything from behind their desk. That law enforcement just doesn't work that way. You have to go and you have to talk to people.
If you don't do that, you wind up being that female agent who's pointing a pistol into a baby crib because she's so amped up and has to be tactical using the flashlight on her pistol as opposed to just flipping a light switch. Staying on task with federal law enforcement and also the resistance, and then also a way that they might not be getting a comprehensive look. We have Donald Trump now demanding information about the 2 assassination attempts against him. Let me restate that. the 2 assassination attempts against a former and would-be future president last year that we don't talk about anymore. Now Donald Trump's saying that he wants some of that information. So headline USA comes from Ken Silva. Report: Trump orders Secret Service to provide him all info on would-be assassins. Quotes from the president says, quote, I want to find out about the 2 assassins. Why did the one guy have 6 cell phones? Why did the other guy have foreign apps? No more holding back because of Biden. I'm entitled to know, and they held it back long enough. End of quote. I get a little concerned because I want to go to privacy concerns so much on this about why did you have multiple apps? Because then there's always going to be the push for we need the Going Dark initiative and have real-time updated access, a skeleton key to your encrypted apps. But we'll pause that. That's maybe a conversation for another episode because apparently the United Kingdom is getting the skeleton key. So maybe later this week we'll get to that, Garrett. But not a comprehensive look because my awareness is that the FBI took lead on investigating these. So the Secret Service was responsible for protection. I'm sure there's some investigative measures they took maybe as an after action review about the failures that they had, but the actual investigations fell to the FBI. So maybe he should expand that out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation to find out what the status is, particularly because Paul Abate, before he left as the deputy director, was testifying to the United States Senate Judiciary Committee that they were looking at the Butler assassination as possible domestic terrorism, which would ergo mean they put a classified label on it and they could say, sorry, you don't have a need to know. I mean, the president has plenary authority to do that, but so many other people wouldn't have that ability. And they could say, hey, can't comment on that. National secrets, you don't have a need to know. And maybe you don't have a need to know because we might have been doing a playbook on that cat from Butler, Pennsylvania, which to me, if I'm going to go full 51 Spies Who Lies, that had all the hallmarks of an FBI playbook.
Right. And if you pull that thread a little bit more, I think it was around 2015, might have been a little, or I think it was around then. Amarillo, Texas, maybe somewhere in Texas, there you had this FBI agent prompting a terrorist attack. And
the
that's
Draw
when,
Muhammad?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the guy went and showed up. I forget what the convention was, but he starts shooting up the place.
It was a Draw Muhammad competition. And the guard there took him down with a revolver, like a total stud. But present there was an FBI agent who had infiltrated as an undercover this cell, this terrorist cell, and saw them going in with their weapons and drove away because he didn't want to jeopardize his investigation.
And didn't he follow them for like 50 miles or follow that guy for like 50 miles and then is like texting him while they're in the parking lot and then he's just lets him do his thing. So I'm not saying that is what happened here, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. And we don't know because they're not releasing the information. And I would say just as a victim, Trump should have, he should have more information than he does. Now he's the president again. And he was a former president who was the victim of 2 assassination attempts. And he's saying, hey, I have a right to this information. Yeah, you absolutely do. And it goes to show again how vile and corrupt and subversive the FBI is. Because if they weren't going to give him the information nearly in real time as they were learning it after these assassination attempts, well, he's the president again. And it's been almost a month that he's been back in office. And he still doesn't have updated information on what happened. It's wholly absurd. And it just, again, goes to show the rot that is occurring in the FBI.
There's rot, not just in the FBI, I think across the entire board. I mean, we just have a unique experience. We're siloed to that particular agency and that particular department. But I think there's going to be an honest, I don't know, assessment, maybe you could describe it as of who are the slugs across the board. So the consultants are coming, Garrett, in the form of the Doge, but to set the mood, I think we got to go to a throwback. We talked about the 1997 movie Titanic. And this one was another one from the 90s that I actually preferred, Office Space. And let's talk about the consultants are coming, man.
That's Mikowski? What's he doing?
Oh, probably working on another heart attack.
I've been looking all over for you guys. Have you seen this? I know it. I knew it.
What? It's a staff meeting, so what?
So what? We're all screwed, that's what. They're going to downsize Initech.
What are you talking about, Tom? Now, how do you know that?
How do I know? They're bringing in a consultant, that's how I know. That's what this staff meeting's all about. It happened at Intertrode last year. You have to interview with this consultant. They call them efficiency experts, but what you're really doing is interviewing for your own job.
Tom, every week you say you're going to lose your job, and you're still here.
Not this time. I bet I'm the first one laid off. Just the thought of having to go to the state unemployment office and stand in line with those scumbags.
I'm here for a bunch of them going to the state unemployment office, but the efficiency expert, what does the E stand for in the Doge?
I wonder if this is where Elon Musk got the idea. I mean, that's exactly what the Doge is.
So it's being reported now that they could be bringing in efficiency experts, and they're demanding a list of low-performing federal workers, reporting from CNBC, which isn't quite as communist as its sister networks over at MSNBC and just NBC News. So the Trump administration on last Thursday ordered all federal departments and agencies by March 7th, so less than a month, to submit lists of employees who received less than fully successful job performance ratings over the past 3 years. The memo also orders agencies to identify any barriers to an agency having the ability to swiftly terminate poor performing employees who cannot or will not improve, which is kind of a friendly way of saying to these people, we're going to assume the reason you haven't gotten rid of them is because there's barriers, not because you want to have inefficient people, because people need jobs.
Yeah.
It's
It's
less
like,
than a month, and they're looking back 3 years. I'm
good.
here for it.
Me too. Me too. Because this is one of the main pillars that Trump ran on is reining in federal government spending. And you, I mean, we talk about it all the time. The type, we just did the buckets a couple episodes back of which bucket does the federal employee fall into. We're not making this stuff up. We saw it. We lived it. It's legitimate. Donald Trump obviously is well aware of it. So is Elon Musk. I think anybody looking at our debt clock should be able to presume that there is massive inefficiency going on in the federal government. And typically that boils down to your workforce. So cut them, slash them, get them out.
And this is why every federal worker is that really nervous guy coming out who eventually, in the movie, if you've seen it, invents a mat that you can jump to conclusions on. Just Office Space was such a good movie. And this is hard to see. I'll just have to kind of explain it. Found this from EJ Antony on X. It's a chart of unemployment rates among the different groups and then where people work. And wouldn't you know it, government workers have the lowest unemployment rate in 2024, which is probably why they're really nervous. So in January 2025, unemployment rate for government workers is 1.6%.
Wow.
I mean, that's incredible. And then the highest one in this one was agriculture workers. So you're dealing with seasonal work, so almost 9%. You have other ones like hospitality or education, which are like 7%. So, I mean, I think that it gets a little bit granular and nerdy, Garrett, but there's a reason that they're nervous, because they realize deep down that they're overpaid and underworked to do the job that theoretically they're supposed to do. And the job they have is probably not worth doing to begin with. I mean, how many of them get sent home as non-essential workers during a government shutdown or during a fake pandemic, whatever they want to go. So moving along here, this is from the AP. I want to pull it up, one, because of the picture. They're trying to just characterize Elon Musk as being, I don't know, some sort of like weirdo. This is Trump and Elon Musk demand termination of federal office leases through the General Services Administration. I don't know what that picture is of Elon Musk. He's having a moment. Maybe he's a Pentecostal, speaking in tongues, whatever. But this is the strategy that the media, the left-wing media in the country, is proffering. Okay. So let's build it up. Last week, regional managers for the GSA, General Services Administration, received a message from the agency's Washington headquarters to begin terminating leases on all of the 7,500 federal offices across the country. The order seems to contradict Donald Trump's own return to office mandate for federal employees, because it's confusing. Like, you're telling us to go back to work, but you're going to not renew the leases for the office buildings that we work in. This is a little bit funky. What's going on? So, adding confusion to what was already a scramble by the GSA to find workspace. They were trying to find additional workspace because all these people hadn't been at work in a couple of years, I don't know, maybe they could have just gone back to the exact place that they were at when they left 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But, it is the government. They have to create work for themselves, and everything is an emergency and a panic. That's how you get to spend lots of money. But it may reflect the Trump administration's belief that it won't need as many offices due to its efforts to fire employees or encourage them to resign. This is a sister piece to this. This comes from the Washington Post. Democracy dies in darkness. I've got 2 of them today, mostly because a journalist from Washington Post has reached out to all the suspendables in preparation of a hit piece against Kash Patel and others. And for everybody's edification on that one, this guy, I said I would speak to him and would do so because the Washington Post colluded with the FBI to besmirch my reputation the night before you and I publicly testified. I'm a little bit loath to speak to them, but I said, look, if you're an honest broker, I'm happy to have a good faith conversation with you. I'm going to record it, and that makes sure that you don't take me out of context and you report accurately what I say. And he said, okay, I just want to give you an idea of what I want to talk about. I want to know the contents of any private conversations that you've had with Kash Patel. So I want you to violate that.
Yeah.
So I said, that's a no from me, Doc. That's the Washington Post. But what they're reporting on here, again, a very grim and dark picture of Elon Musk. In a chaotic Washington blitz, Elon Musk's ultimate goal becomes clear. What is the ultimate goal? He wants ultimate power. As much as half of the government's non-military real estate holdings are set to be liquidated, a move aimed at closing offices and increasing commute times amid a sharp new limits on remote and telework. Quote, we've heard from them that they want to make the building so crappy that people will leave, said one of the senior officials at the GSA. Quote, I think that's the larger goal here, which is to bring everybody back. The buildings are going to suck and their commutes are going to suck. To replace existing civil service, Musk's allies, they're like 19-year-olds who call themselves big balls, are looking to technology. And this gets a little bit, I don't know how I feel about it because it's sort of bringing Skynet to a self-aware. Doge associates have been feeding vast troves of government records and databases into artificial intelligence, looking for unwanted, they want to find the inefficiencies, unwanted federal programs, and trying to determine which human work can be totally replaced by AI, machine learning tools, or even robots. As long as they don't give them access to the nukes, I don't know, Garrett, but they're looking for efficiency right now. At least that's the top line thing here. And they're using artificial intelligence to identify problematic spots and then maybe finding places that they say, hey, maybe the person whose job it is to order more paper clips when we get low, that can just be a computer that has a tabulation and says, well, when we get to this level, I automatically reorder from Amazon.
I've on one hand, I really like this because it's that whole back to the E in Doge, E for efficiency. And I've got my hesitations about AI. Yeah, I certainly do. I certainly have my hesitations, but at the same time, it's proving to be an immensely useful tool, and for far more than just our thumbnails too, Steve. But but it made me think of one of the suspendable types who is not public, uh, but it is the person who brought forward the Trump questionnaire that was kind of a hot topic in around this during summer, I would say, because I remember Tom Tiffany, who's a congressman here in Wisconsin, he asked Christopher Wray about it, but this guy was taking, because the weaponization committee put out their full report, it's like 17,000 pages, so he was just taking chunks, like a lot of the depositions, they're 100 plus pages, and he was taking those, injecting them into AI and asking for summaries and key quotes and things of that nature, and then it was spitting out like 1.5 page summaries of it. And I was like, dude, this is pretty useful actually to help you get an idea of what's going on here. And I'm sure that whatever Doge and Elon are using is far more sophisticated to figure out some of this rot, but I like the idea of making it suck. If you've been in some of these older government buildings, they do suck. They really suck. And they're kind of like a dungeon, very not a lot of windows, and
Hollywood does not portray accurately the facilities that you work in. If you work in anywhere outside of one of these ivory tower type of
Mhm.
locations, like Washington D.C., I'm sure is far more state of the art. But we worked in an old bank building. I think you worked in a convention center.
Mhm.
I worked in the top floor of an old bank building that was so old that every spring when the snow started to melt, water would drip through the ceilings and a lot of the time land on computers. That's the level that we had.
Ours wasn't that bad.
And they were always trying to move us to a new location, and the rules for doing that are really draconian. We were in a unique spot. This is off topic, but where I worked in Northwest Iowa was on the border with Nebraska and South Dakota, tri-state area. So we always said, "Hey, why don't we put the office in South Dakota?" Because even though that's not technically our area, that's my Minneapolis division. We could just say, "Hey, we're 1 mile in. We'll cover that county if it's that big of a deal to you guys." But then on our pay stubs at South Dakota, it's a tax-free state. Maybe
Oh.
you could recruit people to come work on Indian country. It would be a good idea. And then Chuck Grassley said, "I want the office to be across the street from my Sioux City office, so I can say that the FBI is across the street from my office in Sioux City." So they put the nix on that. It was going to take I believe it was described to me as a literal act of Congress, which is accurate because it had to be written down literally.
Mhm.
All right. But the last thing
91.
from this Washington Post piece that I do think is worth noting is that the White House officials have begun preparing budget documents because we have this upcoming budget fight that seek to cut some agencies and departments by as much as 60%. According to two other people familiar with the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to reflect internal deliberations. It's unclear whether Trump will feel compelled to ask Congress to approve those cuts. So 60%, I think that's a good start, but it's certainly nothing that we've ever seen. We always have to hear about a reduction in the increase is going to leave us all with the bodies piling up in the streets right now. 60% reduction, particularly in some of these useless agencies that we covered down on HUD over the weekend for those who missed it. And let's spend $500 billion on homeless AIDS victims, that sort of stuff. People working in that program probably need to look for greener pastures for themselves. So away from the resistance within the Washington construct, we do have some state legislators that are taking a stand, the stand of resistance, Garrett. They're going to be doing the LeBron James attach a safety pin to their lapel. So you know that in this time of the Orange Man, the literally Hitler presidency part due, that coming and talking to them, you are in a safe place unless you're a baby in their womb. So this is from local reporting. Michigan Advance state legislator says she underwent sterilization to avoid pregnancy during Donald Trump's presidency. Michigan State Rep Lori Pahutsky said Wednesday that she underwent surgery earlier this year to become voluntarily sterile out of fear for the future of reproductive health access baby murder with President Donald Trump back in office. Quote, just under 2 weeks ago, I underwent surgery to ensure that I would never have to navigate a pregnancy in Donald Trump's America. Language in that
Jeez.
one, right, Garrett?
Yeah.
Navigate a pregnancy. She said, quote, I refuse to let my body be treated as currency by an administration that only sees value in my ability to procreate. If you know people who are questioning how serious this is, I'm going to repeat myself. A sitting government official opted for voluntary sterilization because she was uncertain she would be able to access contraception in the future. So it seems to me that she was going to do it anyway. I don't know if I'm necessarily bemoaning that decision on her part, but that seems like a pretty extreme take on
Yes.
who the president is.
What is she going to do in a few years when he's no longer the president? And she's this is why we call it the modern day Molech death cult, because even what she's saying, it's literally, Steve, I'm going to use it. Literally, the most miraculous thing that any human being can do is have a child. And only women can do that. And so she is self-selecting to destroy that miraculous ability because of Donald Trump. When these people tell you who they are, you got to believe them, because she's telling you that she's straight up off the deep end into the satanic death cult because Orange Man bad. It doesn't. I don't know if it can get much worse than that. I mean that's insane. That she's proud of this fact.
It's a cult. It's a secular religion. The derangement is clearly just manifest in her entirely, that you would go to those lengths. I mean, she doesn't, from those comments, it doesn't strike me as someone who I want rearing a child, but you never know. I mean, isn't the entire basis of having a biblical worldview that you can have a come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term? And
Yeah.
maybe she would have the clouds clear and have a moment of clarity and realize that she does have a unique superpower that is evident on around page 3 of Genesis, where it talks about men and women. He created them, and he didn't create them as in they, them. All right, Garrett, we're going to close it out today. Want to get your thoughts. Maybe I gave you a Jesus juke there, my biblical perspective, but yours is way better than mine typically. And then we'll take it to a palate cleanse, which is a fun counterbalance to Reverend Al Sharpton.
No shock here, Steve. We're back in Proverbs because I think what I'm about to hit covers, it encapsulates everything we've talked about. And it encapsulates resistance from wicked people in government who don't want to enforce law that is righteous law, like not letting gang members be here illegally. And it encapsulates efficiency because it talks about working hard. And as we know, most in federal government do not. So Proverbs 13 verses 4 and 5. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. The righteous hates falsehood, but the wicked brings shame and disgrace. I love Proverbs a lot. The brevity of Proverbs for me. You can just read one line and it's like, oh man, there's so much packed in there. So it truly is a gem of wisdom, the good book of Proverbs.
Well, we opened it up with the clip from Al Sharpton because resist we much and we must. And he's definitely a race huckster who has used that as a cudgel to personally enrich himself and to make people just generally angry at each other when it's really just skin deep. A nice counterbalance of that is this cat named Kayvon, who is a comic, does clean comedy, which I am a fan of. Takes a lot of talent, I think, to do that. And he has a better, unique perspective. He wants you to laugh at this sort of stuff. So this was his experience when he went to the airport with a name like Kayvon.
One time I went to the airport in Atlanta, Georgia. There's a black dude working TSA. Give him my ID. He's like, all right, Kevin, have a good day. I go, no, sir, that's not my name. He's like, it's not Kevin? I'm like, nah, dog. That's Kayvon. And I knew he liked it because his voice went up a little bit. He's like, your name Kayvon? That's cool, man. All right, Kayvon, I like that. Have a good day, Kayvon. I'm like, you didn't get my last name yet. He's like, hold on, Kayvon, let me see your last name. Mosey? I'm like, nah, player. That's Moeezy. His voice went up even higher. Your name is Kayvon Moeezy? That's your real name? I go, yeah. And he said the funniest thing. He goes, how you get a black name? Are you black? I'm like, no, sir, I'm Persian. He's like, nah, that's black. That's a black name. One time I went to the air.
Good stuff from Kayvon.
That's good.
Just got to laugh at it sometimes, guys. He goes on to describe in that clip, if you ever see it, how he then walked away to pretend to be a black guy for the first time and couldn't do it because he's deep down kind of a white guy. All right. So that's going to do it for us today on the American Radicals, guys. Back with you Thursday. If you haven't already, make sure you do smash the thumbs up, follow the channel. Thursday, 10:30 is the next time we will be with you. Until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.